Hello everybody. So I'm here with Katie and Wendy,
Hello.
who you already know. And we are going to talk about the dieting, or world of dieting and nutrition, and why it is so confusing and contradictory, and what's really going on.
Yeah.
Big question, what is going on?
What's going on? So what prompted this one?
Well,
this was your idea.
you know me, I've done every bloody diet under the sun. And I've recently been embarking on ketogenic diet with the help of Wendy. And I guess, why that over something else? Why vegan versus carnivore? Why calorie counting versus carbs? Or whatever. It's all so conflicting. There's so much information out there. And I guess that my view is, having done all these things myself, is that some stuff works really well for me, but then I see some stuff that doesn't work for me that works for other people, and because we're not all the same, right? And so when this industry tells us that this one thing is for everyone, that makes me go, ugh. And so I just want to understand, why do we have so many different methods of dieting, that if you speak to the person promoting that method of dieting, that's the one way to do it? Why do we have that? Why is it so different? Why is it such a minefield? And how can people navigate it without driving themselves to insanity and failing?
That's a big question.
It is
It's
a
a
big
long-winded
one.
question.
And I think it depends where you start from, because I'm a real advocate of eating real food, but if you're somebody who's really clinically obese, maybe actually like a shake type scenario might be really helpful short term to lose a lot of weight. But I don't think that would be good for your average person, because it doesn't teach you how to cook your own food. Certain drugs, I mean, you work with medication for weight loss, and I think it can be really helpful, can't it?
It can. For some people, it's the way in, which is what you've just sort of talked about. Finding your way in is really important. And obviously it's got side effects and risks. But for some people, and I was talking to you about this earlier, who've got a really, really busy life and they don't have time to think, it can actually give them that way into noticing their body for the first time. But it's one of many, many approaches to the same problem. I think for me, part of the issue is where we get our nutritional and diet advice from, and a lot of it tends to be magazines, newspapers. And what's their agenda? Their agenda is to sell.
100%.
And same as diet clubs, their agenda is to get you in the door, and ideally you have success, but if you can't stick to it, which is often the case, they want you back in again. So we kind of go to these places, and where we get our advice from is a problem.
I think if we can talk about diet clubs for a second, and I've been down this route. When you go to a room of people dieting under a diet club, there'll be like 10% of those people that have done it and stuck to it and are really aspirational, and you're channeling them. You're saying, I want to be like them, and they're usually the ones leading it, right? But the other 90% of people are just going like this all the time, and they're not having consistency. And as you say, they do really well for a week, and then they go out and celebrate and have a curry, or they do really well for a period of time, lose loads of weight, and then fall off the wagon, or they don't. They think, oh, I've lost the weight now, and assume it will stay off, and then a few months later they're back in the door again. And you're right, I think it works on that kind of rotation of people doing well, feeling good, falling off, coming back, and it just seems to go in those cycles. Why do we think that is?
I think it to be honest, it comes down to the fact that the eat less, move more calorie restriction model is only part of the picture. We've all been told that if you want to lose weight, well, eat less, move more, and that makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't take into account hormonal aspects of weight loss. It doesn't take into account the satiety value of certain foods, and essentially when you are on a calorie restricted diet, you'll lose weight for probably the first month, maybe 2, but then your body realises, oh, you're starving yourself, and the metabolic rate, i.e. the amount of energy consumption that your body loses, reduces. So therefore you need to restrict calories further to lose more weight. And then you get into this horrible cycle of starvation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you think a lot of them then result in, being, what's the word I'm looking for? Low nutrients. But what's the word? What's they say when people are starving? I don't know.
Nutrient deficiency?
Nutrient deficient,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. So do you think that is effectively what happens through these, is you end up in a nutrient deficient cycle? And you end up, because I certainly, sorry, I knew you were just going to interject, which was the right thing to do. But I just had this thing just popped back into my head. When I had my accident, every single doctor I spoke to said, have you lost a lot of weight recently? Because that can affect bone density. And I had lost 2 stone. And so that every single doctor I spoke to said that could have been an influencing factor for nutrients deficiency. And then subsequently, causing me bone density issues.
Absolutely. I think what you were saying, Wendy, is about, we're not getting enough information. Calories in, calories out. We know it's flawed now, don't we? Because, what about the quality of the food? And that's the problem. When you focus on a calorie, it's meaningless. It's either good or bad. It doesn't tell you whether that's good for your body. It's the old avocado versus donut argument, probably about the same amount of calories, but the nutrition in an avocado is amazing compared to just the pure sugar in a donut. So when we focus just on calories, we're not looking at what our body needs. We think of food as fuel, but it's so much more than just energy. We need nutrition.
And I think that's where that empty calorie concept comes in. So a donut is essentially going to give you energy, but it's not going to give you any nutrients, whereas say the avocado is going to be high in folate. There's going to be a lot of healthy fats in there that are going to nourish the body and actually would keep you fuller or satiated for longer. Because if you eat a donut, well, if I was to eat a donut, I could probably eat 3 donuts in a row. Because for me, I can easily quite binge on sugary food like that, whereas I don't think I probably could eat 3 avocados in a row, but the point is I wouldn't want to,
because there's healthy fats in there and very low sugars, and we know that eating too much sugar will cause your blood sugar to spike, and then it will cause it to crash, and then you get this artificial sense of hunger, which is basically blood sugar crash. I need something to bring my sugars back up to normal. So you end up on that sugar roller coaster, whereas eating the sort of more nutritious, fat-rich, protein-rich approach will just coast for longer.
And when we did the keto course, we talk about where the dietary guidelines come from, and people are really shocked that they're not based in rigorous science. I think you were quite shocked. I was really shocked when I realised that actually the dietary guidelines are based on, at best, tenuous science. It's all cherry picking of data.
That's the eat well plate, right?
Yes.
So the eat bollocks plate, as you call it.
Yeah, I do call it.
It makes sense, right? Do you remember?
Well, you'd be healthier if you ate. Oh dear, ignore that.
We'll edit that out. It's live.
Oh no.
But it wasn't just a few years ago. They had literally a can of Coke on that.
Did they?
Graph. So Zoe Harkin, the obesity researcher, has a whole article about this particular sort of NHS diet plan. And just a few years ago, that it was on the graph. They had the picture of things that you should eat, and it was in the section of eat less of this, but it was still a picture of a fizzy drink.
Should be on the eat none of this.
But why is it on there at all? Really? Yes, people will do this. We all have these sorts of things, but on a dietary guideline, it shouldn't really.
And what I find really interesting is that Diet Coke, for example, on every weight loss plan that's calorie restricted, and even when you look at the labels on a Diet Coke, there's a traffic light system, it's always green. It's not a sin. You're allowed it. You know, on pretty much every organised diet plan like that, you can have Diet Coke.
And yet, we've all read ultra-processed people,
Right.
haven't we? And Chris Van Tulleken says that actually Diet Coke is associated with greater weight gain
Yes.
in the long term than regular full-fat Coke. You're like, really? So, yeah, it's all very skewed. There's a lot of marketing, isn't there?
I think there's, I mean, my conspiratorial hat's coming on, but whether it's a conspiracy, these people have sat around a table, or perhaps it's just profit, a lot of the guidelines are backed by industry. So, for example, Coca-Cola runs I don't know what you'd call it, but it's called the Institute of Life Sciences. And it's a group of large companies, including Coca-Cola, I think Nestle. It's a really big, and it sounds like the Institute of Life Sciences, it sounds like it's a good thing. But actually, it's about maintaining profits for these multinational, big...
It's the Institute of Marketing.
Yeah.
It is.
But I mean, and Chris Van Tulleken touches on that in that book, Ultra Processed People. I know we bang on about it all the time, but honestly, it's the best freaking book ever.
Really, listen to it on audiobook if you don't want to read it. That's what I do.
Yeah,
it's
I did.
Great.
I listened to it in the car.
It's great. It's great. But it's true. You know, these companies make money out of food-like substances, and I always try and say this to patients: when you have a choice over what to eat, choose something that hasn't got a traffic light on it. If it's got a government traffic light on it, probably don't need to eat it. You know, broccoli and steak and things like that don't have that. It's not processed, it's real food. And really, I think it's deceptively simple, but we're being bombarded with messages to buy all the time, including from diet clubs.
Making it complicated.
Buy this plan, do it this way because this works. When actually, I think if we stick to real food, like you were saying, tune into your own body, it will tell you.
I saw something once that said the way to get people to buy into something is to confuse them. So,
Well, it definitely is confusing.
and the more complicated and complex you make it, but convince them it's the right thing, the more likely they are just to follow it, because they don't understand the science, but they trust that the marketing is accurate, so they just follow it and do it. Because it's come from an official source, whatever the official source is. But even as we know, things like Coca-Cola making it onto the NHS dietary requirements chart, like that, it's been infiltrated not just through the governments but also into the NHS, into our medical systems. You know, this marketing is being infiltrated into these systems. But as you say, the truth is, if it feels complicated or you need to look at a traffic light system, there's probably a reason why they're doing that. And the truth is, if you just eat a food that you know is a food, it's not complicated at all.
Well, isn't it interesting that humans are the only animal that seem to need guidelines on
How
what
to
to
eat.
eat?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you
see a gazelle,
or a
reading the
giraffe,
packet.
you know, they eat what they eat, and they're not worried about calories. I mean, you don't see a lioness on the prairie going, "Oh no, I'm not going to have that gazelle because I put on a few pounds."
Take me over my calorie limit for today.
But the only animals like humans are the animals that we feed. So you do see overweight pets for sure.
And what are they eating? Processed foods.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's, if you look at animals such as dogs that are overweight, it's because the owners are giving them human type treats.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if they were just left, I don't think they certainly wouldn't be thinking about calories. They would eat when they were hungry, and they would fast or not eat when they were full.
Exactly, and use their instinct to find something that would be appropriate to them.
But now you find, like, a dog will beg at the table for food because I guess they're not associating that they're full, they're associating this is addictive, this is tasty, this is, you know, and I think that's how you get the overweight pets, right?
Well, and also that's their instinct is to eat. You know, we kind of, that's how we are supposed to be. We're supposed to be always on the lookout for food. It's a survival instinct. But because it's literally everywhere, it's so easy to overeat now.
And the bliss point, I think we need to talk about the bliss point. I mean, the bliss point sounds blissful, but it's used by companies to create addictive moreish foods, and it's the perfect balance between sugar and fat, because actually in nature you don't really find the perfect balance. 50% sugar, 50%, apart from nuts maybe,
And
nuts.
breast milk.
Oh, and breast milk.
And what are babies?
Yeah.
Chubby.
Yeah.
For survival reasons.
So they work on this bliss point, and they actually employ, they call them food architects, to create the perfect balance between sweet, salt, crunch and fat. And so it is impossible, and some people are more unable to limit than others. You know, some people can have 1 or 2 biscuits, can't they? And I mean, I can't do that. I would have a whole packet. But it's good business, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, and we assume that people have addictive personalities. That's just a fact, right? And we assume that addiction means drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex. But
Food
is addictive. But there's still a lot of, you know, particularly the medical industry will say, oh, there's no evidence that sugar is addictive.
Oh, I think there's just so much. Do you remember John Yudkin wrote the book Pure, White and Deadly, which was basically all about that, you know. But he went to his grave being discredited for his research. And that's the other thing we have to remember, I think, is when we look at these headlines like, oh, this is bad for you, oh, this is really good for you. There are academics arguing over this all the time, and there are egos at play in this industry. And where does the funding come from? Are you asking the right questions? How are you conducting these studies? We have to remember there is a big argument in the field of nutrition, and to just take everything on how it affects our own bodies.
Yeah, how do we feel about it? When we eat something, does it make us feel good? Do we get a negative response to it? Because we don't think about that. And often when we get a negative response to something, we don't go, oh, it's because I ate 6 Kit Kats. We go, oh, I'll have to go to the doctor and I'll get a tablet. Must be something wrong with me.
And the doctors, which isn't through any fault of their own, are not trained in nutrition. They don't have any nutritional training whatsoever. Well, maybe a little bit, but you know, not to the extent that you would have, Wendy,
and you. But I mean, and the ultimate argument here is that the dietary guidelines, in my view, are wrong.
Yes.
You know, they are wrong from when they came in, which was sort of essentially the early 80s, which says that on your eat well plate, that 1/3 of that plate should be a macronutrient that is completely non-essential. I mean, if you're telling people that you should be eating 1/3 of your diet should be a non-essential macronutrient, that's insane.
You mean carbohydrate?
Yeah,
I find it so interesting because I was talking to my kids recently. My little boy wanted to see a picture of a sumo wrestler, and I was like, okay. We googled sumo wrestlers, and then I was looking them up on Wikipedia and looking up, well, what do they eat, right? So, you know, a sumo wrestler's really big and morbidly obese, and actually their life expectancy is a good 10-20 years behind the average person in Japan. They eat with their lunch something like 6 bowls of rice. And they drink pints and pints of beer, liquid toast, as they call it.
Really?
Yes, to maintain that build. And that, you know, that's just a fact. And yet we talk about rice as being, you know, a healthy food. But we have to be a little bit careful with this idea that carbohydrates are useful. I mean, you look at what do you do to make a foie gras, you know, fatty liver. That's basically a goose having a fatty liver. They shove grain down its gullet until its liver swells up so much that they can sell it to people to eat. It's hidden in plain sight. We fatten cows on grain to get the marbling. It's
corn-fed chicken.
Yeah, but we can't seem to translate that into. Well, we're getting there, but it's.
But then it's so ingrained,
Dun-dun.
isn't it? You know, and it is. I mean, we're all told. We were talking about Kellogg and cereals before we came on, and you know, it was a great marketing ploy that actually came from Kellogg, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But any grain, any cereal, I mean, even if it was bran flakes, essentially is going to be really high in sugar. And now we pack our children off to school eating essentially sugar for breakfast. No wonder these kids are crashing and then having to refuel with chocolate for, you know,
But you can fix it with a Special K diet.
the Special K
I
diet.
Remember
did
the
that when
Special
I
K
was a
diet?
teenager.
Yeah.
Drop a jean size with
Yeah,
Special K.
that's how they marketed Special K.
Oh, right.
You just have a bowl of Special K for 2 meals a day, and then you had your evening meal, and that would be a diet
But
plan.
you wouldn't even get any of your nutrients.
No,
You
we care
wouldn't get
about that,
enough
do they?
protein.
No.
You've got no essential fats.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, diet is so important for our mental health. You know, whether you're overweight, underweight, whatever, your mental health is going to be affected by the food that we eat. And it's so important, and yet we don't think about that.
We don't value it, and I think partly it is to do with where that information comes from. Either we don't get that nutrition information, not properly, or we get it from sort of pop culture sources, and it's not, you know, it's not treated with the same respect as other areas of science. Maybe because it's quite a new branch of science, relatively speaking.
And I think it is quite difficult, isn't
Yeah.
it? So most of the science that comes through diet come from what they call food frequency questionnaires, which is where they send out thousands of questionnaires to a group of people, and they'll ask something like, how many portions of red meat did you eat in the last month? Or how many portions of green vegetables? Well, it's really difficult to assess that, isn't it? I mean, yeah.
You're just guessing, aren't you?
And and then they'll ask you your portion size. Well, nobody weighs what they eat, do they? I mean, unless you're sort of a bodybuilder, you know, you're not going to do that. So lots of information comes out of these food frequency questionnaires, and they show associations. So there may be, for example, an association between a cohort, so group of people that have done the questionnaire, and say colon cancer and red meat. But what they don't say is that cohort may or may not be higher in smoking. They may or may not be drinking more. So an association doesn't prove causation.
Exactly.
You know.
And even with the red meat question, that question doesn't account for, did you have your red meat within a burger bun and a pile of fries from McDonald's? You know, we're not actually looking at what it's eaten with. And it's asking those right questions. A, people don't know the answers, and B, we're not asking the right questions. It's just, so we have to be very careful with nutrition science. It's an absolute minefield. And then the money for the studies, who's actually paying for this study? Have they got any conflicts of interest?
That was really highlighted in ultra processed people, wasn't it? That a lot of these studies are funded by bigger corporations like McDonald's or
Institute
Coca-Cola.
of Life Sciences.
Yeah.
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 Well, you know, when you look at the Institute of Life Sciences, say Coca-Cola, for example, and they fund Olympics, and that's because they're basically saying that these athletes drink Coca-Cola, and they can do so because they're exercising. And I think it was that footballer recently,
Ronaldo.
yes,
Yeah.
and didn't he get into trouble or?
Yeah, so he, I speak Portuguese, so I was listening to him, he was like, no Coca-Cola, agua, water. It was like, and he just literally pushed it away in the middle of a press conference. His, you know, views and like they went through the roof for that, and his, you know, association with Coke was damaged because that's not allowed to do that.
And I think Coca-Cola's share price fell.
It did, I think you're right.
Yeah, I
It
think
did.
it fell quite significantly. But you know, we've all got to stand up for what's right, and he did that. And he's got a big enough, you know, voice to be able to challenge. But also, when you look at, and I mean, people, they all have families, they all want to make money, but you do have to question, don't you, celebrities that endorse these types of ultra-processed foods. And if you're, you know, into health, and you're famous because you are a footballer or an athlete, Olympiad, whatever, and you're endorsing some ultra-processed food, perhaps they should question whether ethically...
I remember in the 90s, like the Spice Girls sponsored everything. You know, and I was a young
Cereal
gay man,
packets.
so I was very big into the Spice Girls. But like Pepsi was a huge thing. They did a huge global campaign for Pepsi. And so if you like Spice Girls, you must drink Pepsi. And I can't only imagine the profits that would have created for them and for Pepsi. Like, and everybody won out of that from a marketing and financial perspective. But now we have a whole generation of Spice Girls fans which are now probably still hooked on drinking Pepsi and Coke and things like that. And I remember at that age, I used to have either Pepsi or Coke for breakfast because the Spice Girls told me to.
Well, there we go.
But
So
they
it must be-
infiltrate children, they infiltrate people.
Well, they directly market it to children, which I
Yeah.
think is wrong. I think maybe that's something that actually we should really campaign against. They should not be able to target. And I mean, going back to cereals with the cartoon characters.
Yeah, and the free toy.
Yeah.
They did stop that though, didn't they? You don't get toys in cereal anymore. So
But
I
you
didn't-
do get Happy Meals.
You do have, but I think they had to stop advertising of those as well. I remember McDonald's sponsored our school sports day,
Did you really?
and they used to come with a little pop-up stand and give us juice, and of course it was just sugar in a cup. But that was sponsoring our school sports day, and we used to get vouchers at school for McDonald's for good behaviour, provided by McDonald's.
I mean, it's shocking, and this is where industry profit is coming before health. And something's got to really change. Something really needs to change on a base level. I mean, okay, we live in a capitalist society and, you know, it is all about business and profit, but perhaps that needs to change, you know, and perhaps we need to look at health over and above profit.
So you're right. I mean, but it's all well and good knowing this stuff and being aware of it. But in practical day-to-day terms, how do we navigate it?
I think we all have the power with our purse.
Power with our purse.
Power with our purse. I mean, if we all, you know, I'm very into trying to encourage people to have the best quality food that they can afford. And if we supported local farmers and became friends with our farmers, you know, so we know where our eggs are coming from, we know where our meat is coming from, we know where our dairy is coming from. I know that's impossible for a lot of people, but I mean, we're sat now in Temperance in Gosport High Street, and there's a shop that's just recently opened, and it's going to do really, really well, because it's like short-dated food, you know, like, so it's like a short-dated food shop,
Yeah.
but it's selling essentially ultra-processed foods. So and it will do really well because those foods are addictive
And affordable.
and
Which is another
super
big
affordable.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, and it will do really well. But for me, I cringe because I think, oh, you're poisoning. I mean, I'm sure that the people that own the shop, they don't realise, you know, they're doing a service that they're paying their mortgage with it. But if you step back, you are poisoning yourself with these foods. You're heading for type 2 diabetes. You're not giving your body ultimate nutrition, but essentially it's profitable because it's addictive. These foods are addictive.
And they're cheap because they're mass produced.
Can I just interrupt to say, lovely Lynn has said there's a bit of interference noise, so I don't know how well we're being heard.
That came
on
out
our
ages
video.
ago. I couldn't
Did
read
it?
what it said.
Says there's a lot of interference noise.
Oh, it'll be
Oh,
my
dear.
fire.
It might be the fire.
Shall I turn it off?
Turn
We're
the fire.
almost at it now.
Where was,
We've
where
got
was
people
I?
watching. Somebody else says, oh, Lynn is watching. Can you hear us, Lynn? Please tell us if you can hear us. But, where did we get to anyway?
Oh, how do we practically implement this? Because the other side of this is, okay, that's great. I know all this. I'm going to shop local. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to stop buying processed foods, but I've got a birthday party to go to. Or the school are doing something with the kids and they're giving them hot chocolates. Or you know, how do we then negotiate other influences that we don't necessarily have control over?
It's a challenging one. So, I mean, this is where in my coaching, I tend to help people.
Oh, hang on.
Hello,
I'm watching.
Hello, I'm watching. Oh, you heard.
Oh.
Hi, Suzanne. Hi. So, in my coaching, I try to help people take the gold star advice and make it work in their real life. Because I think that's the biggest challenge is, okay, this is what I should be doing. But the reality is I've got a limited budget. I've got no time. I've got kids who are fussy. What do I actually do? I think it's really personal. I think the processed food argument is a really, really important one because the less of it you eat, the less of it you want. So trying, as a first instance, finding a way to clean up the diet and get rid of the snacks. I mean, that's massive. I see people in my practice who do nothing more than quit evening binge eating and immediately feel so much better. Just making a commitment to not do that, for example, or to upgrade one product instead of having, I don't know, something a bit junky, you try and make it yourself. One thing. Cook once a week. Start small, you know, start small, build those habits, make it feel achievable.
Start small and notice how you feel after.
Absolutely.
And that might give you the encouragement to do more, right?
Make it a
hang on,
habit.
something else. Can hear you all, just a lot of hissing and yeah, it's the heater.
It is the heating. Hi,
All
Ray.
right.
Yeah,
I think that's really good advice, and not to beat yourself up if you fall off the wagon, because what tends to happen is people fall off, they think, oh well, I've ruined it now,
Yes.
so I'm just
They completely give up.
Yeah.
They
we
do
were
this all
talking
or
about
nothing
this.
approach, don't they?
It absolutely is not going to work. So there's a great book, Atomic Habits. Have you read Atomic Habits
I
by
know it,
James
yeah.
Clear? And he talks about the power of very small changes sustained over time. And it's like the cleaning your teeth every day. We all clean our teeth every day, and that means we're not sitting in the dentist chair having fillings and teeth pulled out. Doing the same with your diet is a really great way to look at it. So often with patients I'll say, could you change your breakfast, for example? Let's change your breakfast. It's the first meal of the day, so actually it's quite important. Could you switch out that, I don't know, cereal for some full-fat Greek yogurt with a few berries and some nuts? Or could you make a bit of scrambled egg really quick? You know, could you do that one thing, even if you do it once a week, twice a week, see how you feel, sustain that over time? The change is remarkable. And you know, this book talks about the power of doing that. Really tiny changes sustained over time so that you almost don't notice you're doing it, becomes second nature. That's what I would say anyway.
I know that from previously hosting a diet plan that people would come to me and they'd be all gung-ho for the first couple of weeks, and then they'd slip and slip and slip and fall off, and I'd never see them again. And so I think you're right. If you're not a all or nothing person, which, let's face it, most people aren't, like, don't try and go all in. Recognise the type of person that you are. If you are an all or nothing person, great, crack on, commit. But if you're not that kind of personality type, how can you implement it in a way that's going to work for you?
I would contradict you there and say something different. I see a lot of all or nothing people that I work with, and I try to encourage them to try a slower, more sustainable approach and trust themselves, because I think a problem with a lot of people who go all or nothing is that they think they have to do that, otherwise it's not going to work. But actually trust that a little change sustained over time is going to be more effective for you, because that's what you want. You want to sustain a state, not reach a goal. So,
And I think, have you noticed a lot of people, when they embark on a change, they would rather add something than take something away.
So they want a supplement or a pill or...
Yeah. And I think that the marketing around diets, you know, with these shakes or these protein whatever bars, you know, they encourage people to, oh, you'll be healthier by adding this one thing. But ultimately it's more powerful to cut out one thing. You know, but of course we don't want to do that, because it's so much easier, isn't it, to add something and take something away.
that's really interesting. Good point.
The other thing is, why do people diet? I think for the majority of people, they do it for weight loss. For me, I've more leaned into, particularly in recent years, doing it for health. But I think I'm in the minority. What do you think?
I mean, I maintain a very low carbohydrate diet for my mental health, because I think I've mentioned this before. It was when I went ketogenic the first time for me, it honestly felt like a light bulb had been turned on. I don't think I realised actually how depressed I was until I wasn't. I was just, it was really, really, I can remember the day, and it really was like a switch, like a light bulb. And I know myself, if I eat a little bit off plan, I eat too many of my keto cheesecakes, because I still can't limit, because I am a binger, I really notice my mental health plummets, and I just feel not great. I really don't feel great. So for me, yes, maintaining my weight is important, but living in my own head is much more important than that. And I mean, yeah, so for me, it's mental health, for sure.
Agreed. I think I came to all of this nutrition for weight loss, but what keeps me there is how I feel in my you're right, mental health is far more than anything else. I cannot, if I have a few days, and it tends to happen at Christmas, because I do eat pretty much whatever I fancy at Christmas. After Christmas, I'm depressed. So I go into this with my eyes open. I'm going to have the Christmas pudding, I'm going to have the Ferrero Rocher, whatever it is, but I'm going to have to be mindful that if I don't get myself back to what I normally eat after Christmas, I feel miserable.
Don't they market it as Blue Monday or something like?
Well,
there's a day, isn't there, after Christmas where they say it's the most depressing time of the Christmas period. Which probably because everyone's on a come down for all the food.
We've all eaten and alcohol as well. Let's not forget alcohol's a major depressive. So what keeps me there definitely is health. And actually, what I see with my patients is the people who sustain their weight loss are the ones who've actually chosen to invest in their health, and because they feel, like you said, surprisingly good, like absolutely amazingly good. So they want to feel that way. Of course we want to feel good. That's why we choose the cake, isn't it? But actually, when we discovered by choosing something different, we could feel even better. That's transformational.
And the cake only lasts, 5 minutes, if that?
Yeah.
You know, and yes, it's lovely and it tastes blissful.
It's a dopamine hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it doesn't last unless you eat more cake, which is what I would do. You know.
Something else that you've said before as well is that people that that are chronically overweight, when they do eventually lose weight, they then, what is the need that the eating was trying to fulfill? Because you see that it then transfers to something else. There's like an addiction, and it then transfers to another thing. So they might have lost the weight, but then there's another issue because you're not dealing with the underlying cause.
Interestingly, people that have had gastric surgery, so to reduce the size of the stomach, a really high percentage statistically of those people actually end up as alcoholics following the surgery. Like, I can't remember, but it is quite surprisingly high. And it's this premise that, if you're eating as an emotional crutch, lack of love, emotional boredom, whatever, and then you take that away, they still have that emotional problem. Yes, they may have lost a lot of weight, but they can't consume the food because it will get stuck or they'll be sick. So actually they can consume alcohol because it's a liquid. And I thought that was really interesting.
It's really fascinating. And I see the same with the medication. So, with your appetite suppressed, you can't do the things that you used to do with food. Johann Hari talks about this in his book Magic Pill. He used to stuff, he called it stuffing. He'd have just such a huge amount of food until he felt some sort of contentment from it, but he couldn't do that anymore. They've been taken away, and interestingly, these drugs often take away alcohol appetite as well. So people are left, and it's funny, it doesn't matter which route you go down, whether it's medication, whether it's through a dietary route, whether it's through having sort of surgery, you still have to face the same demons and address them, whichever way. Have I got a question? Hey, nothing wrong with cake. Don't put me out of business. Your cakes are beautiful, Suzanne. Very, very beautiful. They're for special occasions.
And I mean, what is the gap? Do you think it's lack of community, lack of connection? I mean, there's something... Because we live in a society that, you get your happiness from consuming, I guess. you know, and whether that be cake or whether it be
Shopping addiction.
shopping,
Could be anything, yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, consumption's an interesting one. I think, you know, there's a lot of marketing around food for consumption purposes. Good little consumers will keep buying the stuff, right? You know, and when you actually go down a nutritional route and you find something that works for you, your consumption generally dramatically drops. I mean, I may be spending more on food these days, but because I spend money on better quality food, but actually the volume of stuff I'm buying is...
And you're not buying the stuff that's labelled, marketed, branded from these ultra-processed companies. You're going maybe to the farmer and buying it. So these big money-making corporations are losing out. Which is why then they create diet plans that get you back in the loop.
Exactly. Or, you know, I mean, no disrespect to anybody who makes a dietary choice for their own personal reasons, but you look at something like veganism, and I think it's the new low fat from a manufacturer's point of view, because they can say something is vegan and it instantly adds marketing appeal. So,
Look at the Greg's vegan sausage. What was it? That was a massive thing, wasn't it? There was like they were selling out, and there was a shortage about these.
Yeah, and fair enough. If that's how you want what you want to eat, fine. But I think we have to be mindful that just because it says it's vegan
Doesn't mean it's healthy.
doesn't mean it's healthy.
Because a lot of it's super ultra processed. If you look at the vegan cheeses and the vegan meats and stuff, it's just pure processed crap.
It is. It's starches actually. So things
And
like
these fibres, he talks about it in ultra processed food. Yeah, these fibres that actually the body doesn't recognise as food.
we're consuming it, and with seed oils. I mean, we go on forever about this conversation.
Another question.
Another question. Can I also say, if people feel hunger pains all the time, to get checked by the doctors because it could be gastritis? Oh, I don't know if I can tap on the rest of that comment, Suzanne, without turning myself offline. Yes, that's true, but this good point. Always tune in with your body. You know, your body is trying to tell you things all the time. We've forgotten how to do that, and we really owe it to ourselves to listen to what it's trying to tell us.
Listen rather than suppress with consumerism.
Yes,
And that's difficult to do, though,
Really
isn't
hard,
it?
yeah.
Really, because I mean, we're surrounded by advertising, pressure, TV, school. I mean, if your schools are being sponsored by McDonald's or they've got a Coca-Cola machine, I mean, what does that say? I mean, the sugar. I mean, big tobacco, when it became really obvious that we knew that tobacco was linked with cancer, big tobacco significantly channeled their money into sugar.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So
okay.
this is really well documented. And if you remember tobacco, the cards that used to be in there, well, they directly use that marketing know-how with cereals, directly targeting children. Because if you can addict a young brain, you've got a customer for life. And so that's where these cereal packets with the toy, with the cartoon character, comes from.
Even as kids, talking about tobacco and things like that, the coolest thing would be those like cigarette sweets.
Oh yes, which are just sugar.
Just candy sticks.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you even got like a chocolate wrapped with the actual paper on it that looked even more like this. They were disgusting.
And interestingly, with
So cool.
the modern vaping epidemic, it's the combination of nicotine and sugar. So in the vape liquid, it's essentially it's sugar. It's glycerol, which is essentially sugar. And so if you combine nicotine, which is highly addictive, with sugar, and this is why I personally think you see people that vape have constantly got, I mean, it's just constantly in their mouth, isn't it?
Have you seen the air up bottles that kids have?
Yeah, my daughter has one.
Yeah.
She has one. I really read extensively about it. I don't know what I think about it. The ingredients in the pods are a mystery. It does have flavouring.
Yeah, I remember you saying it's like a gateway to vaping.
It probably is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow! What is that?
So the children are drinking water. It's a water bottle with a regular straw in it, but it has a scent pod that clips on the top, and as you drink, you smell a peach or something, and it flavours the water. on the principle that we smell as much as we taste in our mouths. And it's clever technology. I mean, so much of this stuff is clever. Aren't we clever as humans, you know? But, you know, like Zoe Harcombe said, you know, is it humans are the only people clever enough to make their own food and stupid enough to actually eat it?
To eat it, yeah. Oh, I love Zoe Harcombe. I think
she's great.
She's amazing. Yeah,
So-
very clever lady.
Yeah, it's just the new version of candy cigarettes, right?
Probably is. It probably is. And I'm
not
part of
parent.
the
I'm
problem.
not parent shaming you.
I hold my hands up. I'm part of the problem. It's a really difficult thing. It's really difficult to keep your child out of that. And also, I don't want to make it mysterious and exciting. I want to say, here it is, and when you're ready, we'll talk about it. Because otherwise, I worry what happens if you take it all away, especially at my daughter's age 11. Who knows? I'm just making it up as I go along.
Tell me all. We're not preaching. We're just being.
Dunno.
This is just life, isn't it?
Yeah, trying our
We're
best.
just trying to figure it out like everybody else. All right. Well, thank you. That was a lovely chat.
That was a very nice chat.
Yeah, it was really nice to have a chat with
I
you,
know,
Katie.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you very much.
Right.
You're not too bad either.
Yeah, it'll do.
So we'll see you another time. I don't know when, but we will let you know. Have a lovely rest of your day.